Hey, are you excited about the Dead Space remake? Yeah? Well, what if I told you there is another game that blatantly copied the Dead Space formula, fucked up most of it, and is available to play right now? Sounds good? No? Well, it is good for another episode of Things I Fucking Hate, being the Callisto Protocol. If there was ever a game trying so hard to cash in on another game's popularity, it would be the Callisto Protocol. While not being outright bad, there's no arguing what a huge disappointment this was. Honestly, I don't know why this had so much hype. To me, this outcome is not surprising. But still, there's gonna be people defending it, saying it's not that bad and is still a fun game. Well, yeah, it is a fun game, but when you consider the quality of the Dead Space franchise and the remake, which will hopefully not fail, I question anybody choosing this. If you have infinite money, then by all means, otherwise, you may have kinda fucked up. Still, if you like the game, then that's great, you found something you liked. But for those of us who don't like spending $70 on mediocre products, this is 5 things I fucking hate about the Callisto Protocol.
Well, I guess you got it all figured out.
I guess so.
Come on, man, what is this? Huh? Back and forth, Callisto to Europa.
It's Dead Space. Yeah, you knew this was coming. The Callisto Protocol may have failed to recreate the unique feel of Dead Space, but it doesn't mean it can't still rip the game off. In Dead Space, you play as a guy whose job is to not fight aliens in space, but is then thrown into a situation in which he must adapt to his surroundings and complete various tasks to advance the plot. He'd have an armored suit showing off various stats like health, struggle to defeat enemies until a handy message reveals the alien's weaknesses, and even utilize telekinesis to manipulate the environment in his favor, leading to some unique encounters. Wait a minute, this isn't Dead Space. How did I mix that up? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that they shamelessly ripped off almost every unique element of the DS franchise and improved on practically nothing. With the exception of stasis being the only thing they didn't steal, every iconic element is present while making very little effort to do anything remotely innovative.
You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility.
I guess they thought nobody'd notice this. I mean, it's not like there's a game of a similar theme coming out. And yet, somehow, I'm not impressed by this. It's almost like not putting any effort in doesn't lead to good products. Instead, you get a game that I, and likely many others, fucking hate. But at least they're not the exact same characters. Maybe there's something good there.
Change. Do not fear it, for it is only through change that we grow, that we become the best version of ourselves.
The bosses. For this one, I was conflicted whether I should go with the bosses or the extremely dull characters. Fact is, this game has a lot wrong with it, and I had to make some decisions. Yeah, the characters are bland as shit, and again, trying to copy Dead Space, but as long as the game lets you get to the gameplay quickly, I'm not going to complain too much about that. The bosses, on the other hand, are inexcusably bad. First off, you have Leon Ferris, who you fight by pressing the dodge button over and over again, and hitting him after successfully dodging. Then you shoot him, and repeat multiple times until he dies.
Is this a joke?
You'll likely fail this multiple times because you can't comprehend how brain dead this fucking task is. But that's not the end of it. He eventually returns as the second and final boss, in which you do the exact same thing. But wait, that's still not the end, because once you think you've won, he transforms into a giant monster thing, which easily becomes the best boss in the game, if you compare it to the first 2 stages. If you compare it to a Dead Space boss or any other survival horror game, it's kinda shit. It's mainly just shoot the weak point, shoot the head, hope you don't fail to dodge the instant kill attack, and harness the skills you've learned throughout the game to avoid multiple projectiles coming at you at the same time. If that still doesn't sound like fun, you know those enemies that explode if you touch them? Well, in this fight, they're fucking everywhere. And they love to sneak up behind you, dealing cheap damage when you're probably not looking. You can even throw them at the boss for minimal damage. And don't worry, they give you plenty of ammo before going in, because it takes a lot to kill this damn thing. Now, I know what you're thinking. It doesn't sound like a very fun final boss. It sounds like a bunch of cheap bullshit, but as you'll see as we continue to discuss this game, that's a pretty fitting final boss. Almost no thought put into it, cheap and lazy design. If that's not a good way to cap off this game, I don't know what is.
I can't see anything up there. So,
Don't fucking talk to me.
what's your problem?
Just stop.
The stealth. We'll get back to the topic of gameplay later, but the stealth is about as bad as you can get. Rather than give the blind enemies enhanced hearing or something to make them dangerous, they instead cram as many into one room as they can, ensuring you'll have a bad time if you mess up. The thing is, the only reason you'll ever mess up is because of cheap bullshit. Like having to kill 6 of them in the exact same spot, only to have one inevitably appear behind you. And scripted moments that are essentially designed to make you fail the first time and be passed with no effort the second. The result of this are mindless sections that take no thought to beat, yet appear quite often once they're introduced. I guess they were real proud of this. Oddly enough, there are some early sections against the security units that are a lot better, mainly due to the fact that you have to not be seen. In other words, you have to think. You'll eventually get the ability to shoot them, and unlike the others, you're not given the luxury of missing. But, like most good things in this game, it's short-lived. They could have expanded on this and given us some unique sections, forcing you to choose between shooting the units or avoiding them completely, maybe even thrown in some blind enemies. Create scenarios that make you think. Instead, it's repeat the same action you'd have to actively try to mess up until the game does something you couldn't see coming, causing you to start the brain-dead process all over again. If that's your idea of fun, then maybe you won't fucking hate this.
Inmates, I gave you a direct order.
This is not right. I don't belong here.
Listen.
The storage. Yeah, the storage. The way you maintain your stuff. It's an important thing in a survival horror game. How do you think they did? I don't really know what to say about this. Maybe it's not the easiest thing to get right, but I feel like I'm throwing stuff out way too often. And when you play as poorly as I do, that's saying something. A lack of ammunition is supposed to be one of the difficulties of a survival horror game, but in this game, it's more or less trying to avoid throwing stuff out. Granted, it's usually having to leave stuff behind, like much needed health and battery packs, but having to constantly decide what to throw away is a bit annoying. A simple solution to this would be to give you a place to store stuff you're not currently using, like Dead Space and other games did. But as you can likely guess,
They couldn't do it.
even Resident Evil, a franchise that's managed to fuck itself more ways than one, has avoided this obvious dilemma by simply using common sense. Aside from Resi Zero, but at least that game kind of had an excuse since you had the ability to switch between 2 characters, but still, it wasn't a good thing. Either give us a place to keep shit, or a box big enough to keep everything in. Do neither, and we have a common thing that we like to call artificial difficulty. And if you don't fucking hate that, then I'd recommend this game.
And now, you'll all see why. Proof that my methods are worth the risk. Final contest.
Almost everything about the gameplay. And now, we get to the thing that could single-handedly ruin the game even if the other things I hate didn't exist. And that would be a set of game mechanics that I can't believe they had the nerve to release to us around the time of the Dead Space remake. They may have stolen a lot of basic ideas, but the execution is nowhere near as good. In Dead Space, you would shoot off limbs and throw them back, use stasis to freeze certain enemies, telekinesis to throw stuff at them, all kinds of neat things. Not to mention a unique and memorable set of weapons, like the Ripper, the line gun, and classic plasma cutter. In this game, you hit enemies and shoot where the game tells you, guaranteeing success against single enemies. Primarily aim for the tentacles if things get bad, which is the same as a body shot, which is boring and easy. Use telekinesis to instantly kill things, which is overpowered as shit and something you couldn't do in Dead Space. And the parasites that constantly jump out of things, dealing unavoidable damage unless you know they're there, kinda quit being funny after the 50th time. So basically, like the stealth that we already covered, everything is neither too easy, too basic, or just cheap. Encounters that take skill and are fun to play are very uncommon in this game, replaced with cheap, monotonous bullshit to resemble the idea of good survival horror. I don't like to agree with IGN, especially after, but in this case, they undoubtedly got it right. Maybe it's because you do spend most of your time playing the game, which likely turned off their automatic 10. But regardless, when you have gameplay like this, it doesn't matter how much you get to play it. This, and other things, make for a game that I obviously fucking hate. And there it is, 5 things I fucking hate about the Callisto Protocol. If you actually like this game and disagree, that's fine. Let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. I'm the Game Analyst, and don't forget, if you want IGN to like you, and your game isn't irrefutably perfect, just give it a long opening cutscene. Oh, what? You're actually here? That's fucking amazing. I guess you may as well check out the main channel, in which I discuss movies, TV series, and the offensive topics that lie within. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's right there.